The wind moved softly across the Turkish plain, where once, legend said, a city burned for love. For 3,000 years, the world called it a myth. The story of Troy, a city so beautiful it drew the wrath of gods and the envy of kings. Men crossed seas for it, armies fell before its walls. But when the poets fell silent, so too did Troy. Time buried its truth beneath sand, soil, and skepticism. Scholars turned away. Only dreamers still listened for its heartbeat. Among those dreamers was a man named Heinrich Schliemann, a boy born to poverty in a quiet German village who grew up staring at the pages of Homer's Iliad as if they were scripture. While others saw a legend, he saw coordinates. Each line, each verse was a clue. To him, Homer had not sung of fantasy. He had recorded history, real battles, real kings, real gold. Schliemann's life was a testament to obsession disguised as ambition. He became a merchant, a polyglot, a millionaire. Yet no amount of wealth could fill the void that had burned in him since childhood, the need to prove that Troy existed, not as a myth, but as a memory. He studied maps by candlelight, tracing coastlines described in ancient Greek verse. He compared them with the geography of the modern world. And again, his finger landed on one place, a lonely hill in northwestern Turkey called Hisarlik. When he arrived there in 1868, the landscape was silent. A mound of earth rose above the plain, crowned with dry grass and scattered stones. To local villagers, it was nothing more than a ruin among many. But to Schliemann, it was the wound where history bled into legend. Beneath that hill, he believed, lay the bones of Troy. He stood there for a long time, the sun burning the horizon red. Wind whispered through the grass like a language he half remembered. The scent of dust and salt hung in the air. For a moment, he imagined he could hear it, the faint ring of bronze, the echo of war. And then he began to dig. The excavation was crude, almost violent. Archaeology was still young, more an art of destruction than preservation. Schliemann was not a scholar trained in patience, but a businessman trained in conquest. His trenches cut deep into the mound, tearing through centuries of civilizations layered one atop another. Each layer spoke of a city reborn after fire, Troy the Second, Troy the Third, an empire of ghosts. He sought the one that matched Homer's song, the city of Priam and Helen and Achilles, the city that had burned for love. By 1871, the earth began to yield its secrets. Broken pottery, blackened stones, fragments of walls, hints of an ancient metropolis swallowed by time. Still, Schliemann was restless. He wanted proof the world could not deny, gold, treasure, the shimmer of divine history. He believed he was close, and each sunrise found him deeper in the soil. His workers labored beneath the punishing heat, their hands raw, their lungs choked with dust. They uncovered foundations older than memory, stairways leading to nowhere, charred timbers that once held roofs above forgotten kings. Schliemann documented everything in meticulous journals, but behind his notes lay a hunger. He was not merely searching for Troy, he was chasing immortality. The world had mocked him for believing in a fable. Now he wanted it to kneel. One morning, he ordered a trench cut straight through the mound's heart. The locals protested. They said he was destroying more than he was finding. But Schliemann pressed on. The soil grew darker, denser, as if resisting. Then, amid the rubble, a flicker of light. Metal. Gold. A bracelet tangled in dust. Then more. A diadem, rings, chains, goblets. The earth had opened its mouth and out poured its golden confession. Schliemann fell to his knees, trembling. To him, this was the treasure of Priam, king of Troy, proof that Homer's words were not fiction, but prophecy. He gathered the pieces by hand, his breath shaking with awe. That night, by torchlight, he wrote, "Today, I have gazed upon the face of ancient glory." But history would not bless him so easily. The artifacts were older than Troy's supposed time, belonging perhaps to a city long before Priam's reign. Schliemann either did not see this or refused to see it. To question the find meant to lose the myth he had spent a lifetime chasing, so he chose belief and shaped the truth to fit it. He smuggled the treasure out of the Ottoman Empire, hiding it from authorities who claimed it as their own. He called it preservation. Others called it theft. In his home, he dressed his young wife, Sophia, in the ancient jewelry and photographed her, the living image of Helen of Troy reborn. The gold gleamed on her neck and arms, reflecting torchlight like captured sunlight. This was not merely archaeology. It was theater, and he was its playwright. The world hailed him as the man who found Troy. Newspapers crowned him a hero. Scholars were divided. Some praised him, others condemned him. The line between discovery and desecration blurred beneath his fame. His dream had come true, yet his methods left behind a wound that could not heal. In his search for glory, he had destroyed what he sought to preserve. As his fame grew, so did the shadows around his story. Whispers spread of exaggerations, of lies buried with the bones he unearthed. Still, Schliemann pressed on, digging deeper, chasing more gold, more validation. He did not see that the true city he sought was not beneath the soil. It was within himself, lost to obsession. And yet, for all his faults, one truth endured. He had brought the world to its knees before a forgotten hill, and made it believe again in the power of myth. Troy, once a poem, was now a place. The wind that swept over Hisarlik no longer whispered only to ghosts. It spoke to history. As dusk fell on the site, Schliemann stood among the ruins, gold dust on his hands, his eyes reflecting the dying light. The plain was quiet, the air thick with the smell of stone and ash. Somewhere beneath his feet, countless lives slept. Soldiers, lovers, kings. He had uncovered their resting place, but not their peace. He looked out across the silent horizon. The sun sank behind the mound, burning the sky the color of blood. And for a moment, he felt both triumphant and condemned. A man who had found the city of his dreams, yet buried himself within it. The world would remember his name, but the earth would remember his hands. And beneath the plain of Hisarlik, the wind kept whispering, as if warning that every discovery carries its curse. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the heart of legend and ambition. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more tales hidden in history. We'll see you next time. Under the pale light of dawn, the gold burned like captured fire. Delicate crowns, twisted bracelets, goblets engraved with scenes of vanished gods. It gleamed from the soil as if the earth itself were confessing. Standing over it was Heinrich Schliemann, hands trembling, eyes wide with triumph and disbelief. He called it the treasure of Priam. To him, it was irrefutable proof that Homer's song was no mere fiction. The myth of Troy had found its heartbeat again. But history, like gold, is never pure. The moment Schliemann lifted those relics from the dirt, he crossed an invisible line. He had unearthed the past, and in that same breath, claimed it as his own. Ottoman law strictly forbade removing antiquities from the country, but Schliemann was a man bound not by laws, but by his own grandiose visions. He swore his workers to secrecy. Then, late one night, he smuggled the entire treasure out, hidden beneath rags and stones in the dead of night, escorted only by whispers and fear. The very air seemed to hold its breath as the gold crossed borders, leaving behind the soil that had cradled it for millennia. When the treasure finally reached Athens, Schliemann unveiled it not as an artifact of humanity, but as a personal trophy. He adorned his young wife, Sophia, in the ancient jewels, heavy necklaces, diadems, and chains that shimmered like sunlight reborn. She stood before the camera, her gaze calm, her posture regal. In that single, electrifying moment, the legend of Helen of Troy had a new face. That photograph would ignite the world. Newspapers from London to Paris splashed her image across their front pages. under headlines that hailed Schliemann as the discoverer of lost worlds. The gold became a symbol of glory and of deceit. Because beneath all that glitter, questions began to surface that refused to fade. Scholars who examined his findings noticed something Schliemann had conveniently chosen to ignore. The craftsmanship of the artifacts, the metallurgy, the intricate motifs, they all pointed to an era centuries older than the Troy of Homer's epic tale. This treasure didn't speak of Priam or Achilles. It belonged to a civilization that had already turned to dust long before the Trojan War was ever sung. The man who claimed to have proven a myth had instead unearthed an even deeper mystery. But Schliemann couldn't afford doubt. Doubt would shatter his self-made empire of belief. He published his findings with an air of absolute triumph. Every sentence declared certainty. Every illustration was presented as undeniable proof. Yet, between the lines, his pride shimmered like heat over desert sand, and the world, hungry for a hero and a fairy tale, wanted to believe him. So it did. Archaeology had found its poster boy. Museums clamored for a piece of the find. Kings sent their congratulations. Scholars hailed his discovery as a new dawn for the human story. But back in the quiet chambers of the Ottoman government, outrage was brewing. The empire accused him of theft, deceit, and illegal excavation. The gold he so proudly flaunted had been stolen from their land, from their ancestors. They demanded its immediate return. Schliemann simply ignored them. The treasure, meanwhile, began to gain a new kind of power. It was no longer just an ancient relic. It was a modern political weapon, a mirror reflecting greed masquerading as enlightenment. Even Sophia, who once wore the jewels with such grace, started to feel their immense weight. She spoke less of Troy and more of sleepless nights. She confessed to having dreams of burning walls and voices calling her name in a language she couldn't understand. But Schliemann only pressed forward, his obsession growing louder than the truth. He dug new trenches, sought deeper chambers, richer relics. His excavations became more like a frantic search than a scientific study. The deeper he dug, the more destruction he left in his wake. Ancient walls collapsed, priceless artifacts shattered. Crucial historical context vanished forever. The site of Troy wasn't uncovered. It was wounded, perhaps mortally. Archaeologists who came after him would call his methods reckless, his interpretations false, his discovery both a miracle and a massacre. But in the 19th century, the line between science and spectacle was razor thin, and Schliemann danced upon it with the fiery fervor of a prophet. Eventually, the treasure was displayed in glass cases in Berlin. Visitors lined up for hours just to catch a glimpse of the gold of the gods, the relics of a civilization resurrected by one man's sheer conviction. Children pressed their faces to the glass. Scholars bowed in awe. And yet somewhere in the hush of that exhibition hall, a question hung in the air, unspoken but persistent. Whose treasure was this, truly? The ghosts of Hisarlik might have whispered the answer had anyone been listening. Years later, when Schliemann died, he was buried with honors fit for a conqueror of time. His name was engraved in marble, his myth preserved alongside the ruins he claimed to have awakened. But his treasure, that shimmering proof of Troy's existence, began its own modern odyssey. It was locked away, traded, and hidden during the turmoil of the 20th century. The empires that once envied his discovery would one day fight wars over it. The gold that once crowned a mythical queen would pass silently between hands, stained with far more recent blood. The story of Troy had begun with love and ended in ruin. Schliemann's story, it seems, followed the very same path. He set out to find a city, and instead, he uncovered a reflection of mankind itself, greedy, brilliant, and utterly desperate to touch eternity. Tonight, under the soft museum lights, the gold still burns. It no longer answers to Priam, or Helen, or Schliemann. It has outlived them all. The metal remembers what the men forgot, that every treasure unearthed from the past carries with it not glory, but a debt. The earth gave up its secrets once, but it will not forgive easily. And beyond the glass, the silence deepens. The treasure waits, as patient as time itself, for the next hand bold enough, or foolish enough, to claim it. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the past. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more tales from the crossroads of history and legend. See you next time. Berlin, 1945. The city was a ghost, its bones picked clean by fire. Smoke bled from the broken ribs of cathedrals, and the air tasted of metal and ash. But deep beneath the ruins, in the vaults of a shattered museum, something waited. Crates marked with fading ink. Priam's treasure. They had survived the bombs and the silence, the nights when the ground itself seemed to breathe death. No one above knew what slept below, or what it was worth. When Soviet soldiers marched into Berlin, they found a city hollowed out. The Reichstag was a skeleton, its flag replaced by the red banner of victory. The war was over, but the hunger it left behind was not. Among the rubble, they found the Museum for Pre- and Early History. Its walls were cracked, its exhibits shattered, but its safes were sealed. Inside, hidden beneath layers of soot, rested the very treasure Heinrich Schliemann had pulled from the earth decades before. The gold of Troy had survived yet another war, only to be claimed by a new empire. The Soviets called it a trophy collection. Officially, it was about preserving art from a conquered enemy. In truth, it was vengeance, a silent compensation for 20 million lives lost. They opened the crates under dim lamplight, and the gold gleamed again, defiant, eternal. Rings, necklaces, and diadems shimmered like embers against the cold steel of military trucks. To the soldiers who carried it away, this wasn't just history, it was justice. Once the crates reached Moscow, they vanished. For decades, the treasure became a ghost. No museum claimed it, no catalogue recorded it. It became a rumor whispered in diplomatic corridors, a footnote in academic journals. Some said it was melted down. Others claimed it was hidden beneath the Kremlin, guarded like a state secret. In the absence of proof, myth filled the void once more, just as it had for 3,000 years. The gold of Troy had returned to its natural state, legend. Meanwhile, Germany rebuilt itself from the ashes. Scholars and politicians demanded the treasure's return. They called its removal a crime against civilization, a theft of humanity's shared heritage. But Moscow refused. To them, it was the price of survival, the spoils of victory. They reminded the world that Schliemann himself had stolen it first, from Ottoman soil, under the cover of night. Every accusation was just an echo of the last. Each empire claimed the moral high ground, yet none were innocent. The gold passed from hand to hand like a mirror, reflecting the same desire that had once burned Troy to the ground. As the Cold War deepened, the treasure became a classified secret, a ghost in the diplomatic archives. It moved from myth to secret, and from secret to silence. But history has a way of resurfacing, especially when the world grows careless. In 1993, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the doors of the Pushkin Museum in Moscow swung open to reveal a familiar gleam. There it was, Schliemann's treasure, displayed once again. But its placard read not Priam's gold, but recovered war trophy. The past hadn't been lost. It had merely changed owners. Visitors stared in awe, unaware of the decades it had spent in darkness. Children pressed their faces to the glass, just as they had in Berlin half a century before. But this time, the light that struck the gold carried a colder truth. The treasure no longer belonged to any nation, any myth, or any king. It belonged to the arrogance of mankind, to the endless cycle of taking and justifying what was taken. Beneath the museum's polished floors, you could almost feel the echoes of bomb shelters and battlefields, a buried heartbeat. The world had come full circle. Troy burned for pride, Berlin burned for power, and Moscow hid the embers behind velvet ropes and glass cases. Every empire claimed to be a guardian of civilization, yet each in turn had robbed it. It's the same pattern, repeated across centuries, just wearing the mask of progress. And in the middle of it all, silent, unjudging, lay the gold that outlived them all. But even today, there are whispers that not all of the treasure made it to Moscow. Some believe crates vanished in the chaos of 1945, sold on the black market, buried in a forgotten field, or hidden away by a soldier with a secret. Mysterious maps surface in private collections, scribbled with coordinates in faded ink. Rumors tell of pieces appearing in the markets of Istanbul or the vaults of wealthy collectors who swear they have no idea where they came from. Each claim rekindles the old fever. Each denial only adds to the myth. The treasure is no longer just gold. It's a wound that refuses to heal. Historians still debate what Schliemann truly found. Perhaps he hadn't unearthed just one city, but 9. Civilizations stacked upon each other like pages in a forgotten book. Some argue the treasure doesn't belong to Troy at all, but to a people who lived and died long before Homer ever told his tale. But in the end, does it even matter? The artifact has transcended fact. The story is no longer about who owns it, but who needs it. And that need, for proof, for pride, for possession, is endless. Today, in the Pushkin Museum, the treasure glows under carefully controlled lights. Each piece is catalogued, numbered, secured. Guards patrol the halls and cameras watch from every corner. Yet no amount of glass can contain the weight of its history. The silence around it isn't reverence, it's the look of guilt made visible. Visitors walk away impressed, but few understand that every glint of gold is a reflection of the wars that carried it there. For 3,000 years, the story of Troy has been told as a tale of passion and betrayal. But the real story, the one buried beneath the rubble and the myths, is simpler and colder. It's about possession. Whether by kings or conquerors, scholars or thieves, humanity has never learned to touch beauty without wanting to own it. Somewhere, far beyond the museum walls, the wind still moves over the plains of Hizalik in Turkey. The ruins are quiet now, patient. Perhaps the earth remembers better than we do. It has seen empires rise, burn and vanish, all in pursuit of the same glittering lie. Priam's treasure was never cursed. It was humanity that cursed itself by desiring it, and still the legend persists, that deep beneath the soil in chambers no shovel has yet reached, more treasure sleeps, not a myth, not a symbol, but truth, waiting. And every so often, the earth shifts, as if to remind us that what we call history is only what time has chosen to reveal. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through time. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into the hidden corners of history. See you next time. The rain lashed against the farmhouse roof, a relentless drumbeat as dusk bled into the deep, dark night. Inside, I sat by the dying fire, my hat pulled low, the heavy scent of smoke and wet earth clinging to the air like a shroud. Across from me, Nora stared into the flames, her jaw set tight, her eyes raw from tears she refused to let fall. A long, heavy silence stretched between us, thick with all the words we didn't have the courage to speak. Outside, my dog, Rufus, paced under the window, his whine a low, restless sound. He always sensed it before we did, the danger that rides on the edge of a storm. Nora's voice finally broke the quiet, soft, but sharp enough to cut right through me. You can't keep hiding, Ethan. Not from them, and not from yourself. I didn't look up from the fire. You think I haven't tried? The past doesn't just let go because a preacher's daughter asks it to. Her hands trembled as she clasped them in her lap. You saved that child in the flood, didn't you? Everyone in town says so. Why won't you take the credit for it? A bitter smile touched my lips, but there was no joy in it. Because the last time I tried to be a hero, 5 men died and 1 little boy never made it home. That's what my name means now. a grave no one visits. A log cracked in the fireplace, sending a shower of sparks into the hearth. Outside, the wind howled like a wounded animal. Nora rose from her chair and walked to the window, the lantern light painting her in shifting shades of gold and shadow. "Maybe that's what redemption looks like," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "Not being forgiven, but doing what's right anyway." I didn't answer. I couldn't find the words. And then a new sound echoed through the valley. It was a low, distant rumble, but it wasn't thunder this time. It was horses, many of them. My hand instinctively went to the revolver at my hip. Rufus let out a single, sharp bark, a clear warning. Nora turned from the window, a flicker of fear slicing through her calm composure. Who would be riding out in weather like this? I stood up, every movement calm, deliberate, as if my body had been trained for this moment, trained to face the ghosts of the past. "Men who don't want to be seen," I said, my voice low. I started for the door, my boots heavy against the old wood floor. "Get the lanterns out, and if I don't come back, don't you dare say that." "If I don't come back," I continued, my voice firm, "take the north road before sunrise. You'll be safe with Sheriff Danner in Oak Ridge." She grabbed my sleeve, her grip surprisingly strong. "Ethan, please, whatever this is, don't face it alone." I turned and really looked at her then. The firelight danced across her face, and for a fleeting moment, something softened inside me. Something I thought I'd buried long ago with the boy I couldn't save. "I reckon I stopped having a choice a long time ago," I murmured. Outside, the hoofbeats thundered closer, muffled by the driving rain but growing steadier with each passing second. Dark shadows danced along the side of the barn. Rufus growled, a deep, guttural sound in his chest. I stepped out into the night. The rain soaked through my coat instantly, cold and punishing. I walked towards the gate, each footstep an echo of a memory I couldn't escape. 3 riders emerged from the gloom, their dark hats pulled low, their oilskin coats glistening with rain. The lead rider spoke, his voice carrying easily over the storm. "Ethan Cole, heard you've been keeping to yourself out here." I didn't answer. My hand rested near my revolver, but I didn't draw. Not yet. The man let out a laugh, a hollow, cutting sound that grated on my nerves. "We ain't here for trouble. We're just looking for something that belongs to us. You seen a wagon pass through here?" 3, maybe 4 days ago. Had a woman and a boy with it." My eyes flickered. I said nothing, but my silence was answer enough. The rider smirked. "Thought so. Word in town is you've been playing guardian angel again. That's a real shame. There ain't much of a future in that line of work." From the house, the faint glow of a lantern appeared. Nora's shadow silhouetted in the window. Rufus barked again, low and insistent. I took a step forward, the rain dripping from the brim of my hat. "You best turn back," I said quietly. "There ain't nothing for you here." The man's grin widened and his eyes lifted toward the house. Maybe I like what's here. My jaw tightened. Don't. The moment stretched, long and fragile, hanging in the rain-soaked air. Then a hand twitched near a holster. The sharp crack of gunfire split the night. Rufus lunged, snarling, a blur of fur and teeth. The riders scattered back into the darkness. When the smoke finally cleared, I was standing there, breathing hard, the revolver warm in my hand. One rider lay still in the mud. The other 2 had vanished back into the storm. Nora ran out, the rain plastering her hair to her face. "Ethan!" she cried out. "Are you hurt?" I looked down at the lifeless man on the ground, then back at her. "No," I said flatly, but my eyes told a different story. Rufus limped back to my side, a streak of blood matting his fur. I knelt, pressing a trembling hand to the dog's neck. "Easy, boy," I whispered. "You did good." The wind died down for a moment, leaving only the soft patter of rain. Nora knelt beside us, her tears mixing with the storm. "They'll be back," she whispered, her voice full of dread. "I know," I said. I rose slowly to my feet, my eyes fixed on the dark horizon. And next time, they won't just be looking for a wagon. Lightning flashed across the sky, carving my face in silver. And for the first time in years, I felt that old fire stir in my chest. Not the fire of vengeance, but of resolve. The kind of fire that makes a man stand between the innocent and the dark, no matter what the cost. I turned back to the house, my purpose clear. "Get the rifle," I said. "If they want a fight, they'll get one." The storm swallowed my words, carrying them out into the vast, empty plains, where the thunder rolled like the judgment of the earth itself. And somewhere in that wild, endless night, the past began to stir, and it was coming for me once more. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If you felt that storm brewing and want to see what happens next, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the next chapter. We'll see you then.